What the hell are you doing, Mercer? Standing with him?
This man gave us water when the Earth tried to kill us. You came here to take.
He gave them water they returned with an army. Not for war, but for honor. He gave them water when he had almost none left, and 3 days later, an army rode out of the shimmering horizon to answer what he had done. Dust Mesa, Arizona Territory, late summer 1883. The land had cracked open like an old wound, every wash and gully, emptied, every creek bed gone to chalk. Hale Mercer stood by his leaning fence boots, grinding powder that used to be soil, staring at the dead well that had once been the center of his world. If you're listening to this right now, drop a number 1 inch in the comments so I know you're still here on the trail with Hale. The wind moved across the flats carrying dust instead of mercy. It scraped along the warped boards of his cabin, whispered through the yucca stalks like someone sifting dry bones. Hale lifted the empty bucket one more time, though he knew better. The rope bit his palm, the pulley squealed, and the bucket came back up as light as air. He turned it over. A red dust ghosted out, nothing more. "That's that," he muttered. His horse, a hard-used bay named Cricket, watched him from the corral ribs showing in the hard light. When the bucket swung still, the animal didn't even bother to whicker. He'd seen the same show too many times. The nearest town lay 3 days' ride east. 3 days might as well have been 300 with no water, and a horse half dead already. Hale had done the math until the numbers blurred distance against heat muscle, against thirst stubbornness, against the simple fact of a man's body. The answer never changed. He'd survived war, survived winters on the trail, survived a fever that took half his platoon. But drought was a slower kind of bullet, one you watched coming for months and still couldn't dodge. He wiped a cracked knuckle under his nose, tasting dust and copper. The sky had gone beyond blue into something colorless, bleached white, as if the sun had burned all the pigment out of it. The whole world felt used up. Inside the cabin, his life fit into a few shadows. A narrow bed sagging in the middle, a table with one uneven leg, a shelf with 3 books missing half their pages, a rifle with 6 cartridges. He didn't feel like wasting, even on misery. Against the far wall, under a gray rag he used as a cover, sat the only thing that mattered now. A barrel, half full, maybe less. He had moved it inside when the well first sputtered. Each day he rationed out what remained, like a man counting backward from his own death. 2 cups, then 1, then half. Now he'd stripped himself down to a mouthful at dawn, and another at dusk. He had perhaps 4 days' worth left if he stayed put and moved slow. 2 days if he risked riding. Not enough either way if he was being honest. Hale had never liked honesty much. It didn't leave room for hope. He took his battered hat from the peg and stepped back outside. The land spread around him in every direction, empty and bright as a blade. He thought of the road east, the dirt track falling away toward a smear of town 3 days away. The sensible thing would be to sell the place for whatever coin a man could get and ride out while his body still remembered how to sweat. But Dust Mesa wasn't just any scrap of land. It was the last place his brother had stood before the fever took him. The last place Hale had poured water over another man's grave. The last place he still had his own name. You didn't walk away from that easy. He was about to head back in when he saw them. 2 figures moving across the flats where only Mirage usually walked. Heat shimmered, bent the horizon, but these shapes didn't blur away. They held, on foot. Hale squinted, one hand lifting to shade his eyes. Women, he realized as they came closer. Long hair dresses cut to move, not to impress. They walked with the steady, economical stride of people born to this land, not guests on it. Apache. His jaw set. The army had used him for years as a translator between men like these and officers who thought every treaty was a suggestion. He'd seen what raids could do to a homestead. He'd seen what reprisals did to villages that never held a rifle. He'd left that life because the blood on the ground had started to look the same no matter who spilled it. The women stopped at the fence line 30 feet away. They didn't call out, didn't lift their hands. They just stood the heat, turning the air between them into glass. The taller one had hair braided back with a strip of worn red cloth tied near the end. A string of turquoise and bone lay against her collarbone, dusty but cared for. Her face was cut in lean angles, lips, cracked eyes sharp as obsidian. The younger woman stood half a step behind her. She was slighter with a faint scar along her jaw, the kind you got from falling off a horse or getting too close to something sharp. Her gaze moved more, catching the horse, the barrel outlined through the open door, the rifle prop just inside. They looked beyond tired. There was a thinning at the temples, a tightness in the cheeks, tiny tremors in the way they stood too still. Drought had its own wounds. He rested his hand near the butt of his revolver out of habit, not because he meant to use it, because a man felt naked without something solid under his fingers when the world shifted. The taller woman spoke first English, softened by cadence, but clear. Water. Not a plea, not quite a demand, more like naming the thing between them. Hale's tongue felt like old leather in his mouth. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. His voice came out rough. "Ain't much here," he said. The younger woman's gaze dropped to the damp ring around the base of the barrel just visible through the doorway. Her lips tightened. "You have some," she said. "We have none." The taller woman laid 2 fingers lightly against her sister's arm. A small touch enough to say, "Let me talk." "We are Nizoni and Taya," she said. "Our camp lies north. The springs failed. We walked since sunrise yesterday." She nodded toward the flats behind them. "Our people wait. No water." Hale looked past them, but the land lay empty. Either the camp was farther than he could see, or they were hidden by the folds of the Mesa. "You got canteens?" he asked. "Dry." Nizoni's jaw worked. "We gave last drink to children. Of course they did." He looked over his shoulder at the barrel. He could almost hear the water inside sloshing quietly, a trapped whisper of creeks that used to run here. "That water's what's left between me and the Undertaker," he said. "Me and my horse." Taya's eyes hardened. She shifted her weight forward like she'd step right through the fence. "Your land," she said. "Your barrel. Your choice. But when you keep water from dying people, you do not die alone." Hale felt the words like a slap. Something in his chest kicked. "Nobody's taking your gun," Taya added. "Nobody's taking your house. We ask only for what saves breath," Taya Nizoni said softly without looking at her. The younger woman bit down on whatever she'd been about to say. Silence fell again, heavy and raw. Nizoni's gaze came back to Hale, steady and unblinking. "Among my people," she said, "water is not owned. It is held. For all." She took a small step, her hands open at her sides. "But we are at your fence now. So we ask. You can close your door. We will walk away. Maybe we live. Maybe we fall. That is your choice to carry." He thought of the road east, of leaving this place behind, of his brother's grave under a pile of stones on the hill, of the war of women in burning camps, trying to carry children and water, and failing at both. He thought of a captain once saying, "You can't save everybody, Mercer. Best stop trying." The barrel sat inside in the corner of his eye, waiting. He could tell them no. It would be easy. The dryness in his bones said it was sensible. But another voice, quieter, older, sounded a lot like his mother who died in a sod house with a Bible and a cup of well water on the table. "A man is who he is when no one's there to see it." She'd told him once. Nobody but these two would see this. He exhaled through his nose. The sound felt a little like surrender, a little like anger. "Wait," he said. He walked back into the cabin. The cooler air inside felt almost kind. The barrel's lid was a warped board weighted with a stone. He lifted it. The smell of water rose up faint and metallic, and for a second, his throat spasmed, half full. Enough to buy him maybe 4 days. Enough to buy them what he reached for the dipper hanging from a nail. Then stopped. Instead, he dragged the barrel itself across the floor, muscles straining. It bumped over the threshold, leaving a wet streak where a little sloshed out. Hale flinched at the loss. He wrestled it to the fence line and let it thud down on his side of the rails. The women watched, unmoving faces, unreadable. The sun caught the surface through the open lid, turning that small circle of liquid into something hard and bright. "Here," Hale said. "Take what you need." He waited for them to rush it, to cup their hands, to press lips to wood. Instead, Nizoni stepped forward slowly, like approaching a fire. Before she reached the barrel, she knelt and pressed her fingers to the cracked earth just outside his fence. Her eyes closed for a heartbeat. Her lips moved soundlessly, saying something not meant for him. Then she rose, took the dipper, and filled it carefully. Not a drop spilled. She handed the first full dipper to Taya. The younger woman hesitated, jaw tight. Then she lifted it with both hands and drank. Not like someone tearing into a stolen loaf, but like someone taking a blessing. Small, controlled swallows. She stopped before finishing and poured the last inch back into the barrel. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "Taste of stone and rust," she said hoarsely. "Still good." Nizoni filled the dipper again, this time less than full, and drank half of that. Then, without asking, she set the dipper on the fence post between them. "For you," she said. His tongue burned at the mere thought. He almost reached for it. Then he looked down into the barrel and did more math without numbers. Take more, he said. You said your people are north waiting. 2 mouths don't empty a spring. Nizoni's face changed something like surprise passing over it. We will carry what we can in this, she said, touching a small leather bag at her side. Enough to wet lips, not to fill bellies. She glanced at him. Enough to keep children walking. Taya shifted. We can come back for one more dipper, she added, half a question. Hale swallowed. Take what you need this once, he said. After that, the road between us is in God's hands, not mine. They worked quickly now, Nizoni filling the leather pouch, Taya tying it shut. They never took enough to drop the water level below 1/3. When they were done, Nizoni replaced the lid. Her fingers brushed the rim one last time slow. She reached into a small pouch at her belt and pinched something from it. Fine yellow dust like crushed sunlight. Stepping forward, she flicked it lightly over the barrel lid and the ground at its base. Hale blinked. What's that? He asked. Corn pollen, she said. For thanks. He nodded once. It felt wrong to say, more like talking loud in church. Taya adjusted the strap on her shoulder, testing the weight of the water bag. She looked at Hale, eyes narrowed against the glare. Why, she asked. Why give us last drink? We are not your people. Maybe our men cut your soldiers once. Maybe your soldiers burned our homes. Why help? Hale thought of all the banners he'd stood, under all the words he'd heard, shouted in the name of nations and flags and lines on maps. None of them had ever reached into his chest like the sight of someone dying of thirst did. You were at my fence, he said simply. You asked. I had water. Didn't seem right to say no. Taya snorted like she didn't quite believe that, but Nizoni's gaze softened. Just barely. She shifted the turquoise necklace at her throat, thumb rubbing absently over one of the stones. My father is Desba, she said. He leads our people. He will know this. She nodded to the barrel. He will remember who gave breath when the land took it. Your father can remember anything he likes, Hale replied. I didn't do it for remembrance. No, she said. That is why it matters. They turned and began to walk north, not looking back. The heat swallowed them step by step until they became 2 small dark marks and then nothing at all. Hale dragged the barrel back inside. It felt lighter. That night his tongue stuck to his teeth. His body screamed for more than the mouthful he allowed it. He lay on his bed listening to the boards creak as the day's heat bled away, waiting for his heart to slow. He figured he'd bought them a day, maybe 2. They'd either reach their camp or fall on the way. He would never know which. But when his thoughts circled the emptiness in the barrel, the image that came wasn't his own thirst. It was 2 women standing too still in the sun, refusing to beg. He slept badly, waking from dreams of dry rivers and full-cupped hands. The second day, he spilled half his allotted drink because his hand shook too much. The water darkened the floorboards, then disappeared, leaving nothing but a darker patch of wood. He stared at it a long time. His throat wanted him to drop to his knees and lick the plank like a dog at a spilled bowl. He sat back hard, laughing once. The sound hurt. By evening, he made his choice. He wasn't putting the saddle on Cricket. That would just mean they died somewhere else under different sky alone. If he was going to go down, he'd do it here. On this patch of land he'd tried to make something of. In his own bed under his own roof, where his brother had laughed once and cursed the weather and carved their initials into the table. He checked the rifle out of habit, though he couldn't imagine lifting it to his shoulder, feeling as dizzy as he did. When night crept in, the stars looked close enough to reach up and crack with his knuckles. The air held the tiny coolness it kept for the dying. Hale lay on his cot, fingers curled loosely around the edge, and waited for his breath to thin. He thought of Nizoni and Taya only once, strangely. Not about whether they lived or died, but about the way Nizoni's fingers had touched the earth before she drank, like greeting an old friend. He'd forgotten how to do that. He woke to thunder, not the sky kind, the ground kind. At first he thought he was dreaming. A deep, continuous sound pressed into his bones. The walls shivered. Dust rained from the rafters. He rolled off the bedhead, spinning, and staggered to the window. The horizon was moving. Not shimmering. Moving. A dark line getting thicker, swallowing the pale ground. Dust billowed behind it, rising in a long, low cloud. Hoofbeats. Lots of them. Hale's stomach knotted. He grabbed the doorframe and stepped outside, blinking hard against the white glare. They came into focus slowly like a photograph in water. Riders. Dozens. Hundreds. They stretched from one end of his sight to the other, coming on at a steady ground-eating pace. Not a wild charge, but something more terrible surety. Apache. He recognized the way they sat their horses, the way the line flexed like a single animal. Spears and rifles glinted. Feathers lifted in the wind. Faces were painted in patterns he didn't know how to read. Cricket snorted and sidestepped in the corral, eyes rolling. Hale did the math again. 6 bullets. 300 men. Even if it had been 3, the answer would have been the same. He let his hand fall away from the revolver. The line slowed as it neared his fence, then stopped as one body 50 yards out. Dust rolled over them and past them like an invisible tide. 3 riders moved forward from the center. 2 women. 1 man. Nizoni and Taya were different now, in ways that had nothing to do with water. The gray hollows around their eyes were gone. Their shoulders straighter. Their hair freshly braided. Between them rode a man with hair bound back tight, a long feather tied near his temple, so it trailed behind him like a slow flame. His chest plate gleamed with bone and shell. Beadwork crossed his shoulders. Lines at the corners of his eyes spoke of long days squinting into weather and worry both. Even at a distance, his presence was a weight. Chief Desba. Hale's legs wanted to fold. He locked his knees and stayed upright. The 3 dismounted in unison and walked forward. They stopped 10 feet from his porch. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the soft creak of leather, the snort of horses, the faint hiss of dust settling. When Chief Desba finally did speak, his voice carried easily. "My daughters say you gave them water," he said. Hale tried to swallow. His throat protested. He nodded. "Your last water," Desba went on. "The barrel that keeps you alive while the sky forgets how to weep." Still no anger. Just accounting. Hale cleared his throat. "Seemed wrong not to," he rasped. "Wrong to who?" Desba asked. "To me." The chief's gaze didn't waver. Behind him, 300 men sat their saddles waiting for a word. "You know what has passed between our people and yours," Desba said. "You know our dead, and your dead lie in the same dust." He tilted his head slightly. "You had reason to close your door?" Hale thought of burned farmhouses. He thought of smoking lodges. He thought of orders barked over maps and men who never touched the land they drew. "I had reason to help too," he said. "They were dying. I had something that could stop that weighed more than the rest." Taya's eyes flashed. "Many would not see that weight," she said. "Many would say, good. Let them die. Less trouble for me." "Many ain't me," Hale said. For just a heartbeat, the corner of her mouth twitched. Then it was gone. In the long silence that followed, Hale realized he was waiting for something he couldn't name. A verdict, maybe. Desba slowly turned his head toward Nizoni, said a few words in their tongue. Her answer was low and fast. Taya added something sharp. Desba listened without interrupting, then nodded once and faced Hale again. "When my daughters came back to camp, he said they brought water." He glanced north. It passed lip to lip. Old women, children, men who had fought too long in the sun. When it reached the last mouth, there was still a drop left in the skin. He shifted his gaze back to Hale. "They told me of a man who rolled his barrel to the fence instead of dipping from inside. A man who watched them drink while his own throat burned. A man who did not ask who we had fought or what we had done. Only saw 2 people catching fire from the inside." Desba took a step closer. The space between them shrank down to the width of a fence rail, and a few heartbeats. "We did not ride here for revenge," he said quietly. "We rode because debts must be balanced. Water is not a gift. It is a circle. You poured into us. It returns." He lifted his hand. Behind him, the long wall of riders shifted. 2 lines opened like a gate. Through that gate came pack horses laden with skins and barrels that glinted when the light hit them. Sacks of something that looked like grain, bundles wrapped in oilcloth. Hale stared, mind dull. "What is this?" he asked. "Water," Desba said. "Food. Herbs for your horse who will not die this summer. Enough to keep you standing until the sky remembers kindness." Hale shook his head once like he could dislodge the picture. "I don't," he started. Nizoni stepped up beside her father. In the brighter light, he could see the fine lines of a healed scar at her temple, a place where some old wound had once split skin. When we reached camp, she said 3 children lived because your water came. My father counted their breaths while they slept. He said, these belong to that man as well now. The spring above our camp is not dead, she said, just hiding deep. We will coax it out again, but the road to it is long. Your barrel kept us on our feet. You are stitched into our story now, whether you want that or not. A strange pressure built in Hale's chest. He put a hand against the doorframe behind him to steady himself. I didn't buy anything, he managed. I didn't trade. No, Desba said. You did something older than trade. He gestured, and a young man brought forward a long-wrapped bundle. Desba took it in both hands and unrolled it carefully. Hale saw a necklace of carved bone and dark stone on a worn strip of leather. It looked old, but every piece gleamed where it had been touched 1,000 times. This was my father's, Desba said. He wore it when he led us away from a war we could not win into the high country that kept us alive. He wore it when he chose to speak instead of kill, and when he chose to kill instead of kneel. He lifted it. When he was dying, he told me it must go to a man who understands that strength is not how many you put under the ground, but how many you pull back from its edge. He stepped right up to the fence, now close enough that Hale could see the fine white lines of old cuts on his hands. Hold still, Desba said. Hale did. The chief reached over the top rail and looped the leather over Hale's head. The weight settled against his chest, warm from Desba's palms. You are now brother to us, Desba, said loud enough for the line of riders to hear. When you send for help, we will come. When we send for help, you will listen. Not as master and servant, as men who remember the taste of the same dust and the same water. The words unlocked something in Hale's throat he hadn't known was stuck there. I don't deserve this, he said almost to himself. That is why you do, Nizoni replied. He looked at her. Her gaze had lost none of its sharpness, but there was something else there now, quiet and steady. Warriors had already begun moving, unloading skins, stacking barrels against the side of his cabin, laying wrapped bundles of dried meat in neat rows. One woman, old with gray in her braids, set down a sack of corn and patted it once like a sleeping child. All that noise and still the air around the fence felt hushed. Desba put his hand briefly on Hale's shoulder, the way one veteran might greet another. You proved something, he said. That fear is a poor god. Many kneel to it. You did not. That matters more than flag, more than tongue, more than line on map. He turned away to remount. Taya lingered. The land baron who comes to buy your fields, she said, voice low. Harper. He rides with men who shoot at our backs and then write laws to bless the bullets. Hale's head snapped up. He knew that name. Harper owned half the valley east of town and was hungry for the other half. He'd sent letters Hale had tossed unread onto the Coles men Hale had chased off with a rifle laid over his arm but not fired. Last time they'd left with looks that promised they'd be back with more paper and more guns. He will tell you we are thieves, Taya said. He will tell my father we are in his way. Both things are true for him. For us, this land is not a thing you buy. It is a thing you belong to. Her eyes flicked to the necklace at his chest. Now you belong to it too. Before Hale could answer, distant hoofbeats cut through the morning again. Not 300 this time. A smaller thunder. He looked past the Apache line, squinting. 4 riders coming in hard from the east dust, pluming behind them. Men in vests and hats, not paint and feathers. The lead horse carried a man in a dark coat despite the heat. Even at distance, his posture radiated ownership. Harper. For a handful of heartbeats, Hale stood between 2 worlds. One behind him, a sagging cabin and a thirsty horse. One ahead, a wall of Apache riders. And across the flats, the crawling approach of lawyers with guns. Nizoni checked the knife at her belt. The motion was small, but it felt like a declaration. We can leave, Desba said quietly at his shoulder. You did not give us water to become shield. We do not ask you to bleed for us. Hale thought of letters curling black in his stove. He thought of Taya's fierce eyes when she'd stood at his fence dying and still refused to beg. He thought of his barrel rolled to the line. No, he said, surprised at how steady his voice sounded. You're not leaving me to talk to that man alone. He stepped out into his yard, leaving the small safety of the doorframe. Dust puffed around his boots. Harper reined in at the edge of the Apache line horse, blowing eyes darting from one painted face to another. The sight of 300 riders clearly hadn't been in his calculations. What in hell is this? He demanded, voice too loud for the quiet morning. His gaze landed on Hale. Mercer, you got yourself in a heap of trouble, boy. Hale felt the weight of the necklace against his chest, the rough press of carved bone on bone. I've been in trouble a while, he said. Just didn't know whose yet. Harper jerked his reins, irritated. I came with papers, he said. Town council signed, judge stamped. That patch of dust you call a ranch is going to be railroad land. I'm offering you a decent price to walk away alive. If you don't want the money, I can still make sure you're not cluttering it up. He looked beyond Hale to Desba, and the rider's sneer curling his lip. And these, Harper said, need to be off it. Permanently. Your papers, Desba said calmly. Do not speak our names. Harper didn't even glance at him. I don't parley with savages, he said. Something in the air shifted when he said it. Nothing visible, just a tightening like wind changing direction. Hale took a slow breath. You rode out here to push me off my land, he said. You brought guns for insurance. You talk about law like you built it with your own hands. He lifted his chin toward the Apache line. They rode out here to bring me water, he went on. They brought food, medicine. They didn't ask who I'd fought or what flag I used to stand under. He stepped closer to Harper's horse. You think I'm going to stand with you instead of them? Harper's face mottled. You've lost your mind, Mercer, he spat. These people will be gone in a year. I'm the one with deeds. I'm the one with the railroad contracts. You back them, you go down with them. Hale's hand rested on the butt of his revolver, but he didn't draw it. His decision had already been made 2 days ago at a half-empty barrel. If going down's the price for not selling out my own soul, he said quietly, then I guess I'll pay. It won't just be you, Harper snapped. It'll be everybody on this mesa. You think they'll thank you when the army comes up. That trail Taya rode her horse forward until she was even with Hale. The horse stamped, hot breath steaming in the already warm air. You will have to go back down the trail first, she said, to fetch your army. Harper looked from her to the line behind her, 300 strong. For the first time, something like calculation flickered in his gaze. That had nothing to do with profit. He was badly outnumbered and he knew it. This isn't done, he said, voice cooling. You can scare me off today, but papers don't burn that easy. I'll be back with men who don't blink at paint and feathers. You bring them, Desba said. We will be here. So will he. He tipped his chin at Hale. And the land. The land is tired of you taking and not giving. Harper laughed, a hard, ugly sound. The land doesn't care, old man. You are wrong, Nizoni said softly. It cares very much who spills water and who hoards it. Harper wheeled his horse. You just signed your own notice, Mercer, he said. When I come back, I won't bring offers. Hale watched them ride away, dust, swallowing their shapes like a promise. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Desba turned to the nearest rider and spoke a string of commands. Men broke rank, peeled away toward the hills, disappearing into gullies and washes. Scouts. Different kind of war than the one Hale had fought in, but war all the same. Desba looked back at Hale. You could still go, he said. Take your horse. Ride east. Let the storm pass over this place without your name in it. Hale glanced at his sagging fence. At the barrel? At the patch of ground behind the cabin where stones marked his brother's bones. No, he said. If they're coming for this, I'm not leaving it alone. Nizoni studied him for a long beat, then swung down from her horse. We stay also, she said. He will not strike today. He will wait. So will we. Taya rolled her eyes at her sister, but dismounted too. You gave us water, she told Hale. We can give you something back that bites harder than that. What followed was a different kind of drought than the one Hale had grown used to. It wasn't empty. It was full of waiting. Days stretched hot and bright, measured not by cups of water but by scouting reports. Apache riders came and went, silent shadows along the ridgelines. They taught Hale where to set snares, how to read the sky for the smallest change in color that might mean rain, how to listen to wind across stone, and hear footsteps in it. In the evenings they gathered near his small fire. Nizoni sat close enough to share warmth but not quite touching. Taya repaired a tear in Cricket's old saddle as if it belonged to her own horse. Once, as dusk bled out of the sky and the first stars pricked through, Nizoni took a small pouch from her belt and poured a thin trail of cornmeal in a circle on the hard-packed ground beside his doorstep. What's that for? Hale asked. For remembering, she said. For asking the land to know we are here and not forget us when it chooses where to send water. Hale dipped his fingers in the cornmeal and let the soft grain fall. It looked like pale sand against the darker dirt, nothing special. But when his fingertips brushed the ground, something inside him went quiet. He hadn't ever thought to ask the land for anything. He'd just taken from it, cursed it, fought against it. Maybe that was part of the problem. On the fourth evening, a gray-bellied cloud appeared on the far western horizon. It was small and lonely like a lost sheep. Too thin, Taya said, squinting. Just teasing. Hale watched it anyway, long after the others went about their tasks. The cloud slid slowly, stubbornly, as if it had decided it wouldn't give up until it crossed the whole sky. That night, Harper's men came. Not with torches and war cries, Harper was too clever for that. They came like thieves, hoping to catch sleepers. 4 riders, same as before, but this time they came from the south, hugging the low ground, staying in the shadow of the mesa as much as possible. They might have been invisible to someone who slept deep. They were not invisible to 300 riders who had learned to read wind before they could walk. A soft whistle brought Hale out of his bed. He grabbed his rifle and stumbled barefoot to the door. Nizoni waited in shadow, bow in hand. Her hair was loose for once, a dark curtain down her back. The turquoise at her throat caught a stray sliver of moonlight. She raised 2 fingers, then pointed south. Hale nodded. No words needed. They moved together, slipping from one patch of shadow to another, skirting past the corral, out toward the low wash that ran along the edge of his land. The moon was a thin knife behind the clouds. Shapes emerged vague and shifting. He heard the soft clink of metal on metal, the hush of a poorly muffled curse. Harper's men dismounted near the fence line. Barrels around back, one whispered. We knock it over. Set the house alight. He'll have to sign or burn. Boss says we don't need him alive if we can say. The savages did it, another muttered. Hale's hands moved without thinking, muscle memory from a different war sliding into place. He's taken positions like this before, belly pressed into ground, heartbeat a drum in his ears. Then he'd been the one sneaking toward someone else's cabin. Stop, Nizoni breathed. Her palm settled lightly on his forearm. He looked at her. This is your land, she said. Your house. You want their blood on it. He thought of what Harper would say, standing in front of some judge. Those Indians attacked us. Mercy got what he deserved standing with them. Blood would make that story easier to sell. Hale's finger eased off the trigger. What do you suggest? He whispered. Nizoni smiled just enough to show one tooth. It was not a gentle expression. Watch, she said. She whistled 3 short notes. The night unfolded. Figures rose from the dark on all sides, Apache riders moving on foot, now ghosts peeling away from rock and scrub bows already drawn. Whispered words crackled in their own tongue, short and sharp. By the time Harper's men realized they were surrounded, they were already disarmed. No guns went off. No one screamed. It was quiet, work fast. Hale watched as they were herded into the open yard, wrists tied, but otherwise unharmed. Taya stepped close, knife gleaming, and lifted a pistol from one man's belt with a look that said she could have taken more than metal if she'd wanted. Desba approached the captured men in silence. They stared at him with open fear now, all their bravado washed out by the sudden understanding of numbers. You come at night to burn what is not yours, Desba said. You point finger at us when flames rise. You think your paper gives you right to ash. He shook his head once. No more. He turned to Hale. These men are under your roof, he said. Your law, not ours. What do you choose? Hale looked at them. Men in their 30s, 40s, hard hands, fierce sweat shining on their faces. Maybe some of them had never done worse than follow orders and think about a paycheck. He'd been a man like that once. You ride back to Harper, he said. You tell him this mesa is watched. You tell him if he wants a fight, he better bring enough men to dig his own. One of them laughed a breathless, nervous bark. You letting us go? For now, Hale said. I spill your blood tonight, I just give him a prettier story. He doesn't deserve that. He stepped closer to the one who'd mentioned burning his cabin. But you come back here in the dark, I won't be feeling so generous. And I won't be alone. He felt Nizoni at his shoulder, not touching him, but close enough that her presence was like another kind of armor. They cut the ropes and sent the men stumbling toward their horses. A few glanced back, eyes sliding from the line of Apache standing easy with bows in hand to Hale's bare feet in the dust to the necklace at his throat that gleamed faintly. The night swallowed them. Weeks later, rumor drifted up the trail that Harper had decided to move his interests farther east. Something about bad investment and unfriendly terrain. Men who talked too loud at the saloon mentioned crazy Indian-loving rancher up on the mesa, in the same breath as not worth the trouble. The gray-bellied cloud on the horizon finally arrived. It came one afternoon when Hale was repairing a fence post and Nizoni was grinding corn with the heel of her hand, the rhythm a soft, steady heartbeat of sound. Wind picked up not with heat this time, but with something cooler curled around the edges. A smell like wet stone moved through the air. Taya was the first to look up. Listen, she said. They all did. The first drop hit Hale's arm fat and cold. He froze, hardly daring to breathe. A second drop spattered the dust at his boots. Then another. Then the sky opened. Rain poured down heavy and sudden, like someone had tipped over the barrel of heaven. It drummed on the cabin roof, the fence, their shoulders, the packed earth that had forgotten how to drink. Hale lifted his face and let it run over him into his mouth, down his neck. It tasted like metal and sky and something new. Cricket kicked and danced in the corral water streaming from his back. The trough filled in minutes. Puddles formed in the wagon ruts, then became little streams racing each other toward the lower ground. Nizoni stepped out from under the eave and raised both hands, palms up. The rain beaded on her skin, then ran down, pulling little threads of cornmeal with it. "This," she said, "is the land answering." Hale slipped the necklace out from under his shirt and let the carved bone and stone drink too. He glanced at her. "Think it's saying, thank you?" he asked. She looked at him through the curtain of rain hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes like dark wet stones. "It is saying," she replied, "you are not alone." Later, when the storm had passed, and the air smelled of wet dirt and pine, and some kind of sweet plant that only woke up when it rained, Hale stood at the edge of his field. Already tiny hints of green pushed up where there had only been dust before. The land remembered how to be generous given the chance. Behind him, the cabin no longer seemed as small. Barrels lined one side, not all from the Apache, some now full from the rain, off his own roof. Inside, an extra blanket lay folded on a chair, woven in patterns of brown and blue. Nizoni had given it to him with no words, just a nod. He'd draped it over the foot of his bed, but sometimes, on colder nights, found it pulled up to his shoulders by hands not his own. Apache riders still passed now and then along the rim of the Mesa. Sometimes they stopped. Sometimes they only raised a hand, and he did the same, the gesture simple. Enough. One morning he woke to find a dressed deer hanging from his porch beam, blood-drained hide, neatly folded beside it. There were no tracks he could follow that led anywhere but into the rocks. "They take care of their own," Nizoni said when he showed her. She didn't need to say he was counted in that now. The truth of it hung in the air as plainly as the deer. Hale heard himself laugh more often. Soft, surprised sounds that came out like something rusted finally moving. He spent more time listening than talking. To the wind, through the grasses that grew where dust used to lie, to the soft voices around his fire at night, to the way silence sat easier now between him and the woman who had once stood at his fence dying. Sometimes when dusk painted the sky in copper and violet, Nizoni would stand beside him at the threshold, their shoulders almost touching. "You regret giving us water?" she asked him once, quiet. He thought about it. "I regret not having more," he said. "But no, I don't regret the choice." She nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Good," she said, "because you did not just give water. You opened a door. We walked through it. We will not walk back." He turned his head a little, studying her profile. The strong line of her nose, the small faint scar near her temple, the turquoise at her throat glowing softly in the last light. "Door swings both ways," he said. She looked at him then, a slow, full look that seemed to weigh him against the land itself. Whatever she saw, it satisfied something in her he didn't have words for. She didn't move closer. She didn't have to. Belonging, he discovered, wasn't always about hands and lips and whispered promises. Sometimes it was about whose shadow fell beside yours when the sun went down, and who still sat at your table when the coffee was weak and the day had been long. He had spent years keeping people at his fence line. Drought had stripped him down until there was nothing left to hide behind but his own decisions. He'd rolled his last water to two strangers. They'd returned with an army not for war but for honor. In the months that followed, the story spread the way stories do in the territories, half truth, half dust, all persistence. Men in town spoke of the crazy rancher who'd thrown in his lot with the Apache. Riders on lonely trails told of how a wall of warriors had once stood at a white man's gate and left him richer than they found him. Hale didn't much care what version made it downriver. The version that mattered lived here in the way Nizoni's hand rested on the doorframe, as she stepped into his cabin each morning, and the way Taya yelled at him for overworking cricket. As if the horse were her own, in the way Desbaw's riders sometimes paused on the ridge and watched his fields with the quiet satisfaction of men seeing proof that giving water was never a waste. The drought would come again someday. This land had never promised to be easy, but now when Hale looked at the horizon, he didn't see just empty sky. He saw the line where riders might appear when he needed them, and the lines of green pushing up out of soil that had forgiven him for all the years he tried to stand on it alone. He had learned that in a place like this, survival was never meant to be a solitary act. Some nights when the fire had died down to embers and the air outside hummed with crickets and distant horse breath, Hale lay awake and listened to Nizoni's slow, even breathing across the room. The necklace on his chest rose and fell. He would reach down, touch the carved bone, and feel not the weight of a debt but the steady pull of a circle. A man could ride a long way in this country chasing fortune or running from ghosts. He could cross rivers, climb passes, outrun his past for a while. But sooner or later he had to decide who he was at his own fence. Hale Mercer chose, and the land, the people on it and whatever, watched from above answered. For anyone who still believes in cowboy love stories and hard-earned bonds and Wild West stories where mercy matters more than maps and that quiet, stubborn thing some call Wild West love, his choice is still riding on the wind out here, circling like water,